Good morning. As we go to the Chitas of today, we're holding Thursday, the fifth reading in the portion of Shemini. We're holding in the book of Leviticus, chapter 10, verse number 16. So we're holding in the middle of the story of Aaron, the passing of Aaron's two sons, and Moshe Rabbeinu telling them that they have to continue their day on a regular situation, like it is a regular day.
It's not. So why would I be obligated?
So we're holding on verse 16. Moshe. And concerning the sin offering, the goat offering, Moshe Rabbeinu checked out. He discovered he discovered that the sons of Aaron burnt it. And he got angry on Eliezer and his summer, his nephews, and the sons of Aaron, Hanesarim, that were left over lamer. Nash says this is the goat amongst additional offerings of Rish Chodesh. Rish Chodesh, you had to bring a sin offering. That day was Rish Chodesh. It was Rish Chodesh Nisan. The three sin offering goats were brought on that day. The young goat of the installation, that's number one, was one chatas, was Meluyim. The goat donated by Nachshon, who gave the first sacrifice of the first day, that's Chodesh Nisan, and the above mentioned goat of Rish Chodesh. So there were three chatases that were brought on that day, and all of them, only this one was burnt. The sage of Israel differed regarding this. Some say it was burnt because a ritual defiled entity touched it. The others say it was burnt because Aaron and his son were owning him. So they burnt it for some reason, since it was a sacrifice prescribed for all time. See the difference between the first two, between Nachshon and the sacrifice that was brought for the Meluyim, for their inauguration, was it was brought once in their time in history. But the sacrifice of the Rish Chodesh, the Chatas, the sin offering of Rish Chodesh, was brought every month. So that's why Aaron and his sons felt that they needed to burn this one. However, regarding the two goats, which were one-time sacrifice, they relied on Moshe, who told them regarding the grain offering, eat it with unleavened loaves. So that was the difference between this. This was the argument between Moshe Rabbeinu and his brother concerning this third sin offering. Should they eaten from it, or should have they burnt it? Shadarash Moshe, these two inquiries, it says Darash Darash, he inquired about why was this sin offering goat burnt. He was wondering, I told you to eat it. And even though you're owning him, even though you're in the day of mourning, but nevertheless, you were supposed to eat it. You're not allowed to mourn. You weren't allowed to be mourning. He asked, why were these two eaten and this third one was not eaten? You didn't follow my instructions. Why did he get angry on Eliezer, his son? Why did he get angry on his brother? So out of respect of Aaron was his oldest brother. And out of respect of his older brother, he didn't want to get angry at him. So he angered against his sons while displaying anger, even though he's angry mainly at Aaron. Aaron was the Kohen Gadol. He was the main guy. So he should have been the one. Moshe Rabbeinu should have got angry. Lamer, he told him, respond to my question. Why didn't you eat from this sacrifice? Verse 17, why haven't you eaten this offering, from this offering? The Makom HaKodesh, in the place of holy, in the Beis HaMikdash. Kikodesh Kedoshim, it's holy of holies. And the Eibishter gave you this, because one of the ways, as the Torah says, one of the ways the Jewish people are forgiven is when the Kohen eats from this sacrifice. L'chaper aleihem, to forgive them before God. Rashi says, Why did you not eat the sin offering in the holy places? Did they then eat it outside the holy places? Had they not burned it? What then is meant to state in the holy place? However, he asked them, perhaps it had been taken out of the holy place, and that's how it became invalid. Is the reason why he didn't eat it because somebody by mistake took it out of the Beis Hamikdash? Ki kodesh u'kedoshim, and is disqualified by taking it out of the courtyard. They told him no, it was not taken out. He then asked, if it was not taken out of the holy place, why didn't you eat it? God has given it to gain forgiveness, that the priest eats from the sacrifice, and the owner, which the owner over here is a Jewish nation, gained atonement. Rashi says, from here we derive that the goat referred who was the Rosh Chodesh. That's what Rashi says at the beginning. How do we know we're talking about the Rosh Chodesh Chatas? Because it's the Avona Eda. The other two goats, one was for the Kohen, for their own installment, and the other was Nachshon. So it must be talking about the Rosh Chodesh offering, because that was the sin of the entire, that was brought for the entire community. So for here we derive that the goat referred to as Rosh Chodesh, which atones for the unintentional ritual defilement of the sanctuary and the sacrifices for the 8th day of sin offering, of Nachshon sin offering, were not brought for atonement, they were brought for their personal sacrifice. Verse 18. Behold, its blood was not brought into the sanctuary. It was not a chatas that the blood was brought into the sanctuary. You should have eaten it. As I commanded you. Now she says, behold, its blood was not brought. For were the blood brought into the sanctuary, we would indeed have burnt it. So therefore we know a carbon chatas that the blood is brought into the Beis Hamikdash. That's burnt. Like the chatas of a Yom Kippur, the chatas of a Kohen Gadol that sins. But any sin offering, some blood was brought in the tent of meeting, must be burnt up, right? As we know, this was not a sin offering that the blood was brought in the into the Beis Hamikdash. Achol tachla aisei means you should have eaten it and not burned it, even though you are einanim, even though you are mourners. Kashetivesi, as I commanded you concerning the grain offering. Verse 19. And Aaron said to Moshe, Hein hayem hikrives chatos. Did they offer up the sin offering, and their ascent offering, lefnei Hashem, before God? But in such a tragic event like this befell me, and you're telling me to eat a korban chatas today? Hayita be'enei Hashem, would it be pleased by God? Now she says, Dibur, vayidaber, speaking always denotes harsh speech. The same way it says, vayidaber the people spoke against Moshe. It's possible Moshe was angry with Elazar and Asam, and Aaron spoke up in the response. You must conclude this out of respect. That again, Moshe Rabbeinu showed respect to Aaron, and the two sons of Aaron showed respect to their uncle. They didn't say anything, and they let their father respond. They said it'd not be correct for our father to sit here and speak in his presence, nor would it be correct to a disciple contradict his teacher. I might think that Eliezer did not answer because he did not have the ability to respond. Therefore, we know later Eliezer the priest said to the soul, we know that when Eliezer wanted to speak, he knew how to speak. He was never lost for words. He knew how to speak, but he didn't want to show disrespect to his uncle. Did they offer up today? What does this mean? This implies that Moshe had asked him, perhaps you dashed his blood while there's still oin in him. For the rule is that an oinen who officiate profanes the service. Aaron replied to him, was it they who are ordained priests who profaned the service where they performed while in him, who offered up the blood? It was I who offered it up. And I, being a high priest, may offer while still an oinen. So therefore, you have any complaints, you need to look at me. I was the Kohen Gadol, I did the service. But the problem is, V'tekrena oisi ke'ela. And it happened to me like this, means that if the dead were not my sons, but other relatives, for whom I am obligated to mourn in the same way as these, meaning all those regarding who stated in the passage about the priest, that a priest must ritually defile himself for them, like a father, God forbid, a mother, sister, a brother. V'achalti chatas, and I ate this sin offering, means if I would have eaten, would it be pleased? Hayom, today, means a state of mourning during the following night, it would have been permitted. For the state of Einan only applies to the day of burial. So he said, what Aaron said to him, you're right, I should have eaten the other chatas, but would God want me to eat a korban chatas that was brought forever, and a kohen that's an Einan? So people would say a kohen that's an Einan can eat a korban chatas, and that's not true. It was only those sacrifices that was only on that day, that was never ever brought again. But in general, a korban chatas, if there's an Einan, a kohen gadol, even a kohen headed, he's not allowed to eat it. There's that a korban chatas. Hayita be'ene Hashem. Although you have heard that the prohibition against mourners eating a sacrifice is suspended in regard to one-time sacrifice, you cannot infer from this lenience in regard to the sacrifice of the Rosh Chodesh, that was not a one-time sacrifice that was going to be brought every single month. You cannot prescribe the same law to that sacrifice. Ein lach lahaka b'kachi deidus. You should not be lenient by a sacrifice prescribed for all times, like the korban chatas, like the korban Rosh Chodesh that was going to be brought every month forever. So you're telling me about a sacrifice? Hey, you're mixing apples and oranges. You can't mix the two kind of sacrifice. By Yishma Moshe, and Moshe Rabbeinu listened to his brother, by Yita Be'enav, and he was pleased with him. He said, "You're right." By Yita Be'enav, Rashi says, "Hoida v'loy boish." He admitted that Aaron reasoning was superior to his own. He said, "You're right. You're right." He did not ashamed to say publicly, "You're right. I did not. You're right. I'm mixing the two things," and I only heard concerning the sacrifice of that was brought specifically for that occasion, not the korban chatas, the sin offering of the Rosh Chodesh, and therefore you are correct for not eating it, but burning the korban chatas of Rosh Chodesh. Do you see the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu? And that completes the Chumash for today. We now go to the Tanya of the day. We are in the middle of the 41st chapter of Tanya. So the Alter Rebbe says, "But what of one who finds it impossible to arouse even a feeling of intellectual awe of God?" I'm telling everybody that they can acquire an intellectual love of God, but the person can't do that. The Alter Rebbe goes on to say that since this individual too meditates upon the above-mentioned concepts, and furthermore, his intent during the study of Torah and forms of mitzvahs to serve God, these activities are therefore also deemed a constitute a complete valid form of service. Here the Alter Rebbe comes to invalidate mamish every single Jew. It's truly an amazing concept that the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us, because many of us don't have per se an inspiration of godliness, and we struggle with that. And one might think that he's a bad person, and one might think that basically he doesn't serve God, since he chas v'shalom doesn't have any inspiration, not in his heart, not in his mind. He's basically a person that's not inspired. So therefore, maybe I shouldn't serve God. If the Alter Rebbe says that I need to have some kind of intellectual inspiration. I don't have an intellectual inspiration. So that's who I am. I'm being honest. I'm just not inspired. I'm doing everything, but I'm doing it out of rote. I'm doing it because that's what I was told to do, and that's what I feel I should. But not that I have any per se kind of intellectual, spirit, physical, emotional kind of connection. Furthermore, even in the case of an individual who even in his mind and his thought feels no fear or shame, he doesn't feel it. Not because he doesn't want to feel it, not because he doesn't feel it. Meaning, an individual who is not moved by his contemplation of God's uniquely bestowed his kingdom upon him, and furthermore is not moved by the consideration that God is scrutinizing him. Right? He's thus not moved by that statement. He's not inspired. He knows the statement by heart, but for some reason, it doesn't inspire him to simply change his life, to simply feel that this is that he actually feels that way. And they scrutinize him as if he's serving him as a fitting. The Alter Rebbe says it's not really his fault. He shouldn't even blame himself because of this. Why? Because we learned that every soul comes from a certain place in heaven, in one of the worlds. And it could be that his soul, my soul, comes from the lowest atom pole of things. So my soul is a very low voltage soul, as we call it, a very low category soul. His soul, he has a count of a limited grade of his soul, originating the lower degree of Yud Sfiras Asiya, of the 10 Sfiras of the world of Asiya, his soul comes from a very low level. So the soul of this individual comes from the world of action. So he does no action. He knows action. He comes from the world of action. And even in the world of action, he comes from the world of let's say the level of Malchus of the world of action. And even Malchus of Malchus, he comes from the lowest. He comes simply, he knows action. That's his life. From the lowest of the four worlds. Within this world itself, it originates from the lowest degree of the 10 spheres that span it. Since this soul stems from such a low level, he finds it impossible to reveal within himself a sensitivity to godliness, to experience even intellectual. He doesn't. So it's not even his fault. And our souls could come from such a low level. Nevertheless, doesn't make a difference if you're inspired, you're not inspired. Why does a Jew do a mitzvah? Because he accepts himself the yoke of heaven. That's why a Jew does a mitzvah, because he wants to do what is right. Since his intent in his service to serve the king, that's it. Not because of great emotional attachment, not because great intellectual. He doesn't have any capacity. He has an intellect, but he doesn't have the capacity that the intellect creates an emotional, even in the intellect, to kind of create this emotion. So therefore, this is a service. The Eibush is looking for your service, he's not looking for somebody else's. And if this is a service to you, to me, that's a service. For fear and service are accounted as two commandments. There's a concept of fear of God and the concept of serve God. There's two psukim. Li'yiras Hashem, to fear God. Lavin Hashem, to serve God. Two different mitzvahs. And they do not exclude each other. They don't say you cannot serve God without fear, you cannot fear God without serving. Two different mitzvahs. In general, every mitzvah has its own entity. You cannot say because I don't do mitzvah A, I don't have to do mitzvah B. Two different mitzvahs. Two different mitzvahs. Two different commandments. So therefore, I should do all commandments. But one does not exclude the other. So although this individual fails to fulfill the commandment of fear of God, for fear must be felt in one's heart, and at the very least in one's mind, he nevertheless is able to fulfill the precept of divine service by studying Torah, performing mitzvahs, with the intention that hereby serving God. That's it. And not after the Kutshabricha, as we say, I'm the service of God, I'm the service. After all, this has been said, the Alter Rebbe will now say that although this person fails to experience the fear in his mind, since he thinks about these ideas, which should invoke fear, he's fulfilled even the mitzvah of fear of God. So the Alter Rebbe validates even that person. And he says, even though he thinks he doesn't have fear, he does have fear of God. Because every Jew has fear of God. So even though he might consciously not fear the fear of God, but subconsciously he does have fear of God. So therefore, by him thinking about this, he already did the mitzvah of fear of God too. And furthermore, as a matter of fact, he's not only fulfilled the obligation of service, he also fulfilled the mitzvah of fear of God. By introducing the fear into his thought, he's thinking about it. He knows there's a mitzvah to fear God. He doesn't maybe feel it, doesn't have any fear in his mind, but he's talking about it. He's learning about it. By thinking about it, and seeking to arouse it. For at this moment when he's thinking about it, at any rate, the fear of heaven is upon him. At least like if he fears the policeman. So he does like he fears the presence of an ordinary mortal. He's not even a king who is watching him. Right, to somebody, everybody doesn't like to do something from somebody else. So he's afraid, not forget about the policeman. He's afraid of somebody else seeing him. He's embarrassed of doing something and said to somebody else. So he does everything in the hidden. He refrains from doing anything unseemly in the eyes of others. So we all have that fear. What's somebody else going to say about me? What is somebody else going to say about me? Therefore, I act very nice in public because I don't want anybody to think bad about me. That's a simple concept of fear. As Rabbi Yochanan said to his students before he passed away, may it be the will of God. You should have the fear of heaven. Like you fear another person. I wish that you feared God like you're afraid of somebody else seeing you do something. So you should have that same fear. That is good already. That is good. Just like you won't do something in front of somebody else because you don't want somebody to have a bad impression about you, or if somebody say you're not a good person. You should have the same fear of heaven. Whereupon the student said, no more than this, that's it. His response was, the proof is that indeed a true form of fear is as follows. Because for you know that when a person commits a sin, he says to himself, may no one see me. I hope I'm doing it in the closed room. Nobody should see me. Such fear held Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that would ensure that they refrain from sin. At any rate, we note that this manner of fear is duly designated as fear of heaven. Even Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said it's considered fear of heaven because it distances a person from sin. So if you're afraid of somebody else seeing what you do, why shouldn't I be afraid of, why can I use that fear to be afraid of a God seeing what I'm doing? Accordingly, attaining this level of fear, although through meditation, amounts to a proper fulfillment of the command of fear of God. So you see, the Gemara Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai holds that this fear is considered fear of heaven. But self-understood that this fear is called a lower level of fear. V'yiras chet, which is called the fear of sin. Shekedemus l'chachma, which precedes wisdom. Right? We learned that. If there's no lower level of fear, there's no wisdom. You'll never come to wisdom. So it's only a lower level of fear, a fear of transgression, rather than a fear of God himself. So we're afraid of punishment, we're afraid of the action, we're afraid of, oh, what's going to happen if we do this? Oy vey vey vey. But we have to reach ultimately to the higher level of fear. That's a shameful, that's a concept of shame. A state of being abashed and aware and overawed in God's presence. And that's the ultimate level of fear. You don't need a fear of punishment. They're afraid somebody's out to get you. They're embarrassed in front of the king of all kings. I'm sorry, the Isyira is brought down. There is fear and there's fear. There's many, these are the two general fears. Yira Tata, the lower level of fear. Yira Ilah, the higher level of fear. And between them, you have a vast array of fears. So the lower level of fear, which leads to performance of mitzvahs, Torah mitzvahs, the higher level of fear, which results from the proper performance of Torah mitzvahs. So we need both. We need a beginning, a push to do Torah mitzvahs as a lower level of fear, and then we need to do the mitzvah properly, and that's the higher level of fear. But without any fear at all, like parchalela, one's fulfillment of mitzvahs is not soaring high. With love of God alone. Just like a bird, the analogy of a bird, just like a bird cannot fly with one wing. The chila v'rechina hintein gaifa is brought on the Zohar, that the two wings of a bird is Avin Hashem Yiddish Hashem, which makes every mitzvah fly. The spiritual wings of love and God and fear of God elevate the mitzvah performed under this impetus to the supernal Sefiris. As explained in the previous chapters, when one lacks fear of God and acts only out of love, he's operating with one wing, and thus making it impossible for his Torah mitzvahs to fly, to connect to the spiritual worlds above. And so too, fear alone, he cannot fechad. Just like love is, if you do it with love, you're doing it with one wing. So too, if you do it only with fear, you're doing it with one wing. But like parchalela, and it does not fly also above. Af shnikas avedus eved, even though it's called the service of a servant, so it's duly motivated by awe. We must have both wings. We need to have the service of an eved, service of respect, fear, awe, and we need to have the service of a son, which is the concept of the love of God. That everybody shall awaken up his natural love for God that is hidden in his heart, that shall at least become conscious in his mind. To recall his love of God, Echad, the one God, b'machshavte in his mind, u'b'tzaynai in his desire, ledafka b'yisparech, to cleave to God, to reconcile his hidden recollection of his hidden love for God should arouse within him a desire to cleave to God. And this should be his intent when occupying himself with Torah or a particular mitzvah here is about to be performed. That he wants to cleave, to connect, to unite his divine soul, as well as v'achayunis, as well as a vivifying soul, with the shame and all their garments of machshava, dibra, maisa, thought, speech, and action, keniska la'el, as mentioned above. In summary, a Jew's divine service must embrace both that of a son who serves his father out of love and that of a servant who serves his master out of fear. And that completes the Tanya for today. Today is the 19th day of the month, my dear friends. And the Psalms of the day is chapter 90 to chapter 96. If you do those 7 chapters, you do chitas of the day. The Rebbe says in the Yom Yom, the day to day, he writes over here, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitch Rebbe says, my father once expounded on the Manashtana, the 4 questions at the Seder. How is this night, meaning the present final exile of Israel, exile analogous to the night, different than all other nights and all other exiles? And he expounded. On all other exiles, we only dip. The Hebrew word matbilim is used for immersion in a mikveh for purification, expressing scouring, cleansing, purifying. And the rest of the exiles, all those nights, we did not dip even once, meaning the cleansing was not complete in the early exiles, for they did not follow yet another, because they were followed by another exile. But tonight, this exile, we dip twice. This final exile will bring about the scouring of the body and the revelation of the soul. All other nights we eat chametz or matzah. Following each early exiles, our avodah involved, our service involved our godly soul, indicating by matzah, a metaphor for nullification of self, and also by our animal soul, indicating by chametz, a metaphor for ego, self-awareness. But this night, the last exile, following the final exile, will only eat matzah. Our spirit, why? Because the spirit of impurity will be abolished. On all other nights, we eat various greens, meaning the face of a jealous person turns green. The color symbolizes envy. During early exiles, there were various forms of envy. For example, competitive envy amongst the scholars. But this night, after this exile, after the final exile, will only be bitter greens. The most intense sort of envy, similar to the statement of the Talmud, hereafter each tzaddik will be scorched by the canopy of his fellow. Meaning our envy will be in Torah knowledge. We'll be envious of knowledge. And that's a good envy. We should all be envious in knowledge. We should all want to learn more and realize, be inspired by others that have knowledge to create more knowledge. And that's what will be envious after this galus. We'll be envious in acquiring how much more knowledge can be acquired in life. On all other nights we eat either sitting or reclining. Eating indicates the spiritual delight, tainug, in the revelation that ensues from galus, from exile. There is an extension or a manifestation of tainug, delight, and there's yet a higher, the essence of tainug. Some through their avodah attain the extension of tainug, while others attain the essence of tainug. But tonight we all recline. After this final exile, all Israel will attain the quintessential, the essence of delight. And that's how the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Lubavitch Rebbe, learned the Manashtana, how it's connected to the redemption of the Jewish nation. I wish you all a wonderful day. We're not going to have a class today. I wish you all a wonderful day. And Mitzvah, we'll meet each other tomorrow morning. We will continue learning at 8:15. We'll continue learning the chitas of the day tomorrow at 8:15. Have a wonderful and beautiful moed.